questions and the few points I wanted to raise and contribute for the discussion is going back to Borghese and his reference to Pico della Mirandola quote on Genesis a sua immagine. I think coming, of course, from the Muslim theological perspective, there are very close similarities with Islamic theology in terms of Ala Surat al-Rahman, which means that man was created according to the image of the merciful, and on the other side the reference to fitra, which is which you mentioned also as the primordial nature of man. And this is quite interesting because it leads us to make reference to ontology of man, the nature of man, the spiritual identity of man as an axis of his identity. But of course, so even within the Muslim tradition as well as in the Jewish tradition, as you mentioned, the Kabbalah, there is this reference to a mystical, transcendental, transformative rule and code of discipline and organization, which is also the esoteric or mystical dimension. Now, the question would be, within Christianity, this has been somehow organized with contemplative orders, which leads to monastic organization of this dimension of religion. But what about the other religions that do not have the same kind of regulation? So they do not have monasticism, la rahbaniyat in Islam. There is no monastic order in Islam, for instance. And there is, according to my viewpoint, if we make this comparative relation with the postmodern times, how can religious freedom and human dignity for mystical, contemplative vocations in other religious communities find a dignity in the context of postmodern challenges? Because there is I think a discriminatory illiteracy on the spiritual dimension within the other religious denominations. Going to Professor Mancini, models of religious freedom, my question would be more on, if I may say, the inconsistent political implementations of what you framed as a very interesting comparative juridical approach. So on one side you have laws, rights, systems, but on the other side, governments in the secular environment that you described not always seem to be able or want to interpret these guidelines in a consistent way for religious freedom. I'm mentioning, for instance, some narratives, or such as the promotion, at least in Europe, of so-called moderate Islam as something that can be consistent, and so what is not consistent is non-moderate Islam. But that's a narrative where, or on the other side, the reason to train on moderate religious identities is that there is an issue of security. But then I'm afraid we are bargaining security with religious freedom. So how this can be managed? And on the other side, on one side we are discriminating some religious identities, but on the other side we are not discriminating the same religious identities when there is a foreign policy interest, economic interest. So just to give an example, Saudi would be good for some reasons, Saudi would be bad for other reasons. So, and why Muslims in Europe or in other country have to be in somehow governance in foreign policies. So I think this, and the last point would of course be the confusion with migration. Religious freedom, yes, but migration, no. So if the majority of a religious community comes in the West and it's issued through a migration process, how do secular governments manage this, and how are they consistent with religious freedom without having double standards? So this would be my points, but I think, again, many thanks for the presentation.